Today we're changing the oil on a 4th generation Mazda 3, and I'm going to take you through everything you need here. This oil change will be for the 2.5 liter, so just the standard engine, the non-turbo. And you're going to need your oil, so you could get 020 or 5W30, which we'll talk about later. A filter, I have OEM filters linked down below, and all of these tools linked down below. You'll need a 17mm wrench or socket, a Phillips head screwdriver, an oil filter wrench to help make your life easier, a funnel to go ahead and add oil into your engine without spilling it, a drain pan, and a jack. First thing to do is to open up your car and then pop the hood by pulling this lever here. Then at the front of your car, reach your hand under the gap in the hood and slide it to the left, and you'll be able to lift your hood up. Alright, then you could pick your hood prop up by pulling it out of that slot there and putting it where the arrow is up here at the top of the hood. So right here is two key things to do an oil change. You have your oil fill location here with that cap, and then you got your dipstick here, which we'll use to check the oil level in the car. Right now, we could go ahead and loosen up and remove the oil fill cap, so that way air could rush in and the oil will drain faster than if we left that on. Alright, so I put the car up on board so I have just a little bit of extra clearance. The Mazda 3s are pretty low. So now I'm going to go straight under this with this jack, and there's a jack point under there that once I lift the car up, I'll show you what we're using. Alright, so once your car is up to a good height, you could go ahead and put your jack stands under the car. So the location to put the scissor jack on this car is between these two notches right here. So I know that should be a pretty secure area for the jack stand as well. So I'm going to go ahead, get that up to the height that I need, get that as close to the pinch weld as possible. Alright, and now we got those jack stands in position, so we're going to very carefully lower the car onto those stands. So just carefully crack the jack, and it'll get down into place there. Now, I like to keep my jack in place and just move it off to the side as an extra safety underneath the vehicle. I would highly recommend doing that. Alright, so now that we got the car up and safely on jack stands, we could go ahead under it. And there are a few things I want to show you. One is this jack point here, which is that panel right in the center of the car. If you're using a floor jack, that's a good spot to do it. It's nice and secure. And then the next thing I want to show you is this panel here, which we need to remove to get to our oil drain and our oil filter. So there's two fasteners on this, one over here and one over here. And you could use either a Phillips head screwdriver or a hex head to get those off. And now just like that, we have access to our drain plug, which is right here, and our oil filter, which is right there. At this point, we're going to take our oil drain pan and get it underneath where that's going to drain out. The oil is sort of going to drain out and back at an angle, and then the filter will drain straight down. We're going to pull the oil drain plug first, let it drain, and then we'll do the filter. Okay, so here I'm looking forward, so the front of the car is forward in the shop, and you can see that drain plug right there. Alright, so now we could get in here with a 17mm wrench or a socket and get on our drain plug here. This shouldn't be too tight, it should just be a little bit of pressure. Alright, once we get it cracked loose, we could slowly start to turn this out, and I like to put pressure straight in on the drain plug, so that way once we get to the end, it doesn't immediately dump oil everywhere. So here we're getting to the end of the threads, oil's starting to drip. Just pull it right out of the way. Alright, then once your oil's slowed down enough that you're happy with, you could go ahead and put your drain plug back in. Alright, so next I'm just going to wipe down any excess oil, but I'm not going to go too crazy because we have to drop the filter, and when we drop the filter, there's going to be a lot more oil in this area. I'm also going to snug up this drain plug now. Next, we have to remove the oil filter, which is that bigger black canister looking thing right there. And this will just screw off. So this shouldn't be too difficult to grab onto and just loosen up by hand. All right, so now I'm turning off the oil filter. Now, these generally are hand tightened, but sometimes they do get tight if the O-ring swells or if they're tightened a little bit too much. So I'm using an oil filter wrench to turn this off, and now that's hand tight right there. All right, so then we could go ahead and put our new oil filter on. Now, this OEM filter came pre-lubricated on the O-ring, so I'm not going to put any oil on there. Sometimes the oil filters will come in dry, and you would need to just put a little bit of oil on the O-ring to help it lubricate itself and seal up initially. But this just screws right on there, so you'll feel the thread in the middle start to grab, and then you just screw it on just like a normal fastener. And we're just going to go hand tight with this filter here. So that's about as tight as I could go by hand. I felt the O-ring crush down. Now we're going to fill this up and leave this panel down here off just to check for leaks. All right, so now it's time to fill up your oil. So again, this cap should be off, but it's just a quarter turn fastener like that, a little bit over a quarter, and then it'll come right out. So I'm going to use a funnel here so I don't spill oil all over the engine, even though you could do it if you're really careful without it, but I would highly recommend that. All right, so now it's time to go ahead and add oil to your car. If you have a US spec non-turbo, you're supposed to add 0W20 to the car. If you have a Mexico spec car or a turbo, you're supposed to use 5W30. So I have all this oil and all the parts and tools linked down below. Let's go ahead and add some oil. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and add oil. If you have a 2.5 liter, it's going to be 4.5 liters or 4.8 quarts. All right, now we could go ahead and get this panel back up into place. Well, drop the screwdriver in the oil. I did it really quick. You dropped it. All right, now we're going to put our oil fill cap back on. I like to put it that way so you get the lettering towards the front, just a personal pet peeve of mine. But with that on there, we could go ahead and lower the car down and start it up, and then we could turn the car off and check the dipstick for the level. All right, so now we could go ahead and check our oil level. So our dipstick's right down here, which you could just pull right up. And now we want to clean it off because we want to get whatever oil is on the stick off, which will allow us to check our current oil level. So that's nice and clean now. Now we're going to put it back down into the engine, push it, make sure it locks in, and we can pull it up and check the level. So to check the level, you want to look at where the oil is on the stick. So this is the dipstick. There is a line on the oil right about here, which is where the oil level is. Right now it's a little bit hard to see because the oil is very clear and there is also a little bit of residual in the tube. But you want the defined line to fall between the max and the min, preferably on the slightly higher side right after you do an oil change. All right, so now you can go ahead and close your hood. Pop that down into place. Again, make sure your oil cap's tight, make sure your dipstick's down in place, and then you can close it. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and reset that service light that's on the dash. And that's all there is to it.